So, I've been tasked with checking in on old Fox News, so that'll be interesting. We're currently looking at Doge and all of their wonderful things that they're saving us from.
There's a lot of mystery about Social Security and a lot of words about it from, here's what Democrats have been saying about it.
It's absurd that Elon Musk is trying to eliminate billions of dollars from Social Security.
Elon Musk and President Trump have set their sights on cutting Social Security.
Their goal is clear: destroy Social Security from within.
You're in the building. I mean, you're in the computers. What's happening there? What are you doing?
Yeah, it doesn't line up with my experience on the ground. And I'll say the two improvements that we're trying to make to Social Security are helping people that legitimately get benefits, protecting them from fraud that they experience every day on a routine basis, and also make the experience better. And I'll give you one example is at Social Security, one of the first things we learned is that they get phone calls every day of people trying to change direct deposit information. So when you want to change your bank account, you can call Social Security. We learned 40% of the phone calls that they get are from fraudsters.
40%?
That's right. Almost half.
Yes, and they steal.
That's not right. So here's a press release from the Social Security Administration. Approximately 40% of Social Security direct deposit fraud is associated with someone calling in to the Social Security Administration to change direct deposit information. That is very different from 40% of the Social Security Administration's calls are coming from fraudsters. Very different claim. And that is the justification that they gave to force customers to start filing in person or to change their direct deposit information in person. Benefit claimants will no longer have the option to verify their identity with Social Security Administration over the phone. This almost certainly does have some effect on decreasing the amount of fraud, but the issue of there being enough fraud to warrant this in the first place is one question, and another question is who mostly is going to do this over the phone. Young people, me, what I would do is I would do online things, right? I would go online and I would change my Social Security information, my benefits, my income, whatever. I would report different things over the interwebs. Guess who's calling through the phone? Old people that may not have transportation, old people that may not be able to leave something like a nursing home without like scheduling it months in advance, right? These are the types of people who are hurt by you no longer being able to call over the phone because, well, guess what? That's what they do. I know for a fact that you, in your life, know a person who is old, who doesn't use the interwebs, and calls you over the telephone like it's normal. It's not anymore. Stop doing it, Grandpa.
People's Social Security is what happens. Is they call in, they say they claim to be a retiree, then they convince the Social Security person on the phone to change where the money's flowing. It actually goes to some fraudster. This is happening all day, every day. And then somebody doesn't receive their Social Security. It's because of all the fraud loopholes in the Social Security system.
How do you reassure?
So the framing there, happening all day, every day. We have to be terrified of these people stealing your Social Security's benefits. We'll get into this in a little bit. I have a couple things pulled up. But this is not where most of the fraud comes from. This fraud does happen. It does. But saying it's happening all day, every day is creating this idea of worry that the fraudsters are going after your Social Security benefits, and it's very likely to happen to you. It's not very likely to happen to you, and this is nowhere near where most of the Social Security fraud comes from. But let's keep going.
Assure people that what you all are doing is not going to affect their benefits.
No, in fact, what we're doing will help with their benefits. Legitimate people, as a result of the work of Doge, will receive more Social Security, not less. I want to emphasize that. As a result of the work of Doge, legitimate recipients of Social Security will receive more money, not less money.
All right.
I want to emphasize that point and let the record show that I said this, and it will be proven not to be true.
I mean, what he's saying there technically would be true in the sense that if fraud is reduced, then they would receive more benefits as a collective. But, you know, again, it sounds like you will be receiving a larger check in the framing. Just want to clarify in case somebody gets the idea that he is trying to get that idea across. That's not true. As a whole collective, legitimate Social Security receivers would be getting more money.
Let's check back on this in the future.
So, Washington Post, the Social Security Administration website crashed 4 times in 10 days this month because the servers were overloaded, blocking millions of retirees and disabled veterans from logging into their online accounts. Freaked people out. Is that going to change?
Yes, we're going to make sure that the website stays online.
Yeah, I mean, but is it a result of going in there or something you're doing?
No. The amount of
No. I wonder what would cause more people to go to the Social Security website. Could it be not allowing all of the old people that normally do it by phone, not allowing them to do it by phone anymore? To be clear, I believe that there are still phone services available for the Social Security Administration. It is specifically changing your direct deposit information, but this is absolutely a force that can cause the website to crash. It is increasing traffic to the website, so saying no here is just incorrect.
Issues that were the Social Security system are enormous. As an example, there are over 15 million people that are over the age of 120 that are marked as alive in the Social Security system.
And that's an accurate figure.
Yeah.
Correct.
15 million.
Correct. This has been something that's been identified as a problem, again, pre-existing problems, since 2008 at least, from an IG report. So there were some great people working at the Social Security Administration that found this, 2008, and nothing was done. And so 15 to 20 million Social Security numbers that were clearly fraudulent were floating around that can be used to...
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna let him finish what he's saying. But first and foremost, the Social Security numbers aren't fraudulent in the sense that they are like made up by non-entities or something. These are people who did exist and are dead. The other thing is that it bringing it up in this context is implying that there are millions of people receiving fraudulent payments. That is not true. Technically, the words that this person has said are accurate, but the framing in this kind of conversation is completely disingenuous, right? There are millions of people who are marked as alive in the Social Security database, right? But this does not mean that they are receiving payments. But let's see if he clarifies that issue. I doubt it.
Was done. And so 15 to 20 million Social Security numbers that were clearly fraudulent were floating around that can be used only for bad intentions. There's no way to use those for good intentions. And so one of the things the Doge team is doing is carefully and very methodically looking at those and making sure that any fraudulent ones are eliminated.
Brett Smith, working at HHS.
Making sure any fraudulent ones are eliminated. So that's somewhat clarifying. But again, I think the idea that Doge is the first one, like looking at this and they're the like saviors here, is just a mischaracterization. So we have, he said since 2008 it's been a known issue. I have no idea if that's true, but here's a report from 2023 about number holders age 100 or older who did not have death information, right? So here is a Social Security audit or a... here's an audit of the Social Security Administration, and as you can see, they've already been adding death information. This is from 2023, mind you. They've already been adding death information to different records of people. Approximately 1.5 of the 6.5 million number holders age 112 or older from the 2015 report have been declared dead, right? In general, like saying millions and millions of people are still in the database, just to clarify again, does not mean that they are receiving payments. And this is a very important distinction that they do not make, and they do not make it on purpose. I can there are a couple of things that I found in here, and I'm going to refine them and read them out, and so I'll have some cuts right here. All right, so the first thing is, at the time of our review, the Census Bureau estimated approximately 86,000 individuals residing in the United States were 100 or older. The Social Security's Nubident included approximately 19 million, right? So this is where they get the millions and millions are still alive in the database, right? And here in the tax years 2016 through 2020, employers and individuals reported approximately 8.5 billion in wages, tips, and self-employment income using 140,000 Social Security numbers assigned to individuals aged 100 or older. And to be clear, this is specifically a number from the 2015 report, and this is a number through a range of years. So you can't simply subtract these numbers, but, just to do that for simplicity, there's roughly 50,000 individuals at most who are fraudulently receiving Social Security benefits because they are like dead and very old, right? That's the maximum number, but that, again, you can't simply subtract this because this is through a range and this is from one specific year, also a different year, not even in this range, but whatever. That is, it's a very different narrative from millions and millions still in the system, right? Which is technically speaking true, but in the context of waste, fraud, and abuse, you think millions and millions of people receiving payments, which is not true. And just to point this out as before, the Social Security Administration agreed to explore the feasibility of an automated process to update the millions of numinant records age 112 or older. We expanded the scope to review also people 100 years or older. This again is from 2023. So this is already being done, right? The government is already doing these audits, already looking through this information. And here is the number of the 18.9 million, approximately 18.4 million, 98%, number holders, 100 years or older, are not currently receiving Social Security Administration payments and have not had earnings in the past 50 years. And the fact that these people are 100 years or older, have no earnings, and have received no payments indicates that they are dead, right? So you could go through the process to remove them from the Social Security Administration database. Now, have they looked into this? I wonder. Again, this report is from 2023. In response to our 2015 report, the Social Security Administration considered multiple options, including adding presumed death information to these numinant records, but they ultimately decided not to proceed because the options would be costly to implement, would be of little benefit to the agency, would largely duplicate information already available to data exchange consumers, and would create costs for the states and other data exchange partners. Specifically, they looked at the there may be a cut here while I find it, but they looked at the amount that it would cost to transfer all of the data, and it was something like $10 million. But here, let me find that right quick. Yeah, here you go. Officials have noted that since our 2015 audit, the Social Security Administration has expanded the use of the electronic death registration, improved the death information processing system, and used historical death information already in the system to post deaths, date of deaths to over 10 million numinant records, including 6 million records for individuals over the age of 112. They determined that updating the death information for the approximately 19 million additional number holders, based on our 3 recommendations, poses a significant risk of recording incorrect death information, would have limited or no benefit to the administration of Social Security Administration programs, because they already know these people are dead, and it would be costly to implement. Specifically, the Social Security Administration determined the Social Security Administration determined the estimated $5.5 to $9.7 million in expenditures to correct these errors was too costly to implement, and that the effect would have limited benefit to the administration of Social Security programs. We acknowledge that almost none of the number holders discussed in the report currently receive. Again, we acknowledge that almost none of the number holders discussed in the report currently receive Social Security Administration payments. So there you go. The framing here is just completely wrong, right? They are trying to paint it out as millions and millions. They want to make you think, right? Technically speaking, the words that they say here are accurate, but the impression you're left with is millions of people fraudulently over the age of 110 receiving Social Security payments. This is crazy. Thank God Doge is saving us. When again, these processes were already in place, they were already being audited, and the cost analysis was already being done by these administrations, right? It could be true that like updating these systems into a more modern protocol would be worth the $10 million. You can make that argument. They're saying, well, we already give people payments, and largely speaking, our fraud is not from people that are, currently in the system is living, but we know are dead. That's not where most of our fraud comes from. And I forgot to include this part, where most of the fraud comes from. I'm substantiating my claim that this is not at all where most of the fraud comes from. Here's a different audit from July 2024. And here we go right here. The Social Security Administration issues over $1 trillion in benefit payments annually. Even the slightest error in overall payment process can result in billions of dollars in improper payments, which is true, which is why they are aware of that and why they look into these things. But, for example, from the fiscal years 2015 through 2022, the Social Security Administration paid almost $8.6 trillion in benefits, so that's 7 years, so it's about $1 trillion a year in benefits, like they say, and made approximately $71.8 billion of improper payments, which, by the way, is less than 1% 0.84% in improper payments, most of which were overpayments, right? It's not that most of the improper payments are people fraudulently receiving money when they shouldn't at all. Most of the overpayments are from people that duly receive Social Security Administration benefits, but they improperly report their income, or they improperly report the fact that they're paying their own rent, because if you pay your own rent, you get a little bit more benefits. Maybe they're living with their sister and they don't want the government to know that. Things like that. That's where most of the overpayments come from. And so, again, the framing of they're dealing with waste, fraud, and abuse, well, this isn't how you do that. If you want to deal with the waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security, well, you deal with overpayments. You don't deal with people fraudulently receiving payments. And just to reiterate the point, 0.84% is extremely efficient. When I worked at Whole Foods, they would have killed for 1% shrink, only 1% of items being damaged or destroyed in a way where they couldn't be sold. That would have been insanely good for their profit margins. Now, again, to be clear, since it is so much payment, it's so much money involved, little percents like this do amount to large dollar amounts, but in terms of actual efficiency, unless you make it so that there are hundreds of bureaucratic hoops that every single person receiving payments goes through, then you're never going to have every single person perfectly verified, perfectly receiving the correct amount of payments, and in fact, you would leave a lot of people out of the system if you have 100 bureaucratic hoops to jump through. So considering that there are bureaucratic hoops that you have to jump through, you have to verify your identity and your income in different ways, you have to, in different ways, prove to the government that you are, at least to some extent, receiving the payments that you should receive based on different income levels or different housing situations, disability, all of that, right? There are bureaucratic hoops you have to jump through, and considering the scales here, I think it's a good level. I mean, to be clear, I trust the government auditors, the inspectors general doing the audit to actually figure out whether or not they want to decrease that fraud by increasing the bureaucratic hoops. But considering the fact that millions and millions of people, right, 2/3 of the elderly people in America are kept out of poverty from this system, I don't want to increase the bureaucratic hoops. I want people to receive their money. And considering the fact that they're receiving their money with very little fraud, very little waste, I'm perfectly happy with the system as is. And Elon and his Doge bags coming in to throw a wrench in that situation, not a good thing. Let's put it that way. It's where very little of our fraud comes from, so why would we waste the money? They're already doing a very efficient Department of Government Efficiency, interesting. They're already doing a very efficient analysis of what would work, what is the best way to improve the agency, make sure the payments are valid, so on and so forth.
And obviously, another element is Medicare and Medicaid, NIH. What are you finding?
Yeah. Well, I'd say there's a couple of things we're really committed to in our work at HHS. Number one, making sure we continue to have the best biomedical research in the world. And number two, making sure, which President Trump has said over and over again, that we 100% protect Medicare and Medicaid. But there's a lot of opportunity. So if I take NIH as an example, today, if you're at NIH...
I mean, protect Medicare and Medicaid is quite silly in and of itself. Yeah, here we go. Congress is considering a joint resolution to set federal budget targets for the next 10 years, although the actual policies will need to be specified, blah, blah, blah. The U.S. House budget resolution calls for cutting at least $880 billion over the next decade for programs under the jurisdiction of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. So if you look at the entire budget for the House Energy and Commerce Committee, let's go ahead and do that. All right, here you go. This is the mandatory spending under the jurisdiction of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. So if you look here, this is the total budget by fiscal year in billions of dollars. So Medicaid is $656 billion as scheduled for 2025. And other listed programs, you can see these are chump change comparatively, right? So the total outlays is $720 billion. So let's do some basic math. They want to cut $880 billion over the next decade. So that's $88 billion right, from specifically this committee, right? This is the things that they are in charge of, right? Other interest earnings, offset, blah, 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 right? So all of these things, 880 billion divided by 10, 88 billion. Where are they going to cut 88 billion, right? The other listed programs, other total, subtotal other, 44. Interesting. If you add 44 and 21 to whatever chip is, I'm not sure what chip is, that is, what is that, 65? So that means at a minimum, there are $30 billion, I'm rounding, in cuts to Medicaid. That's at a minimum, right, based on these proposed budget cuts. Just to point that out, by the Republican-controlled House of Representatives.
Research, and you get a $100 grant at your...
So, and the point that I was making is that this guy had just said that they want to protect Medicaid, right?
Yeah. Well, I'd say there's a couple things we're really committed to in our work at HHS. Number one, making sure we continue to have the best biomedical research in the world. And number two, making sure, which President Trump has said over and over again, that we 100% protect Medicare and Medicaid.
Interesting. So no Republicans, zero of them, actually zero of them have said out loud to a camera, by the way, we're cutting Medicaid. What instead they do are saying, no, we're just going to cut $880 billion over the next decade from the House Energy and Commerce Committee. But, like, what does that mean? If you actually look at the math, if you actually look at the tables, right, what that actually means is cutting Medicaid.
But there's a lot of opportunity. So if I take NIH as an example, today, if you're an NIH researcher and you get a $100 grant at your university, today you get to spend 60 of that and your university spends 40 of that. The policy that we're proposing to make is that you get to spend 85 of that and your university spends 15. So that's more money going directly to the scientists who are discovering new cures. Another example at NIH is today they have 27 different...
All right, I am roughly running out of time. I could respond to that specific claim. There are many times... There are many different programs that they have cut. In fact, actually, hold on. I think there'll be a cut right here while I try and look for something. All right, so saying that they are, interested in research and science is laughable. They have cut many different things. They have cut many different, especially insane things like cancer research. But here's a Nature article. Everybody knows Nature if you're into science. It's like kind of the popular science magazine. 75% of U.S. scientists who answered Nature poll consider leaving. More than 1,600 readers answered our poll. Many said they were looking for jobs in Europe and Canada. Why? Well, because they know that all of the funding is being cut. All of, the government NASA funding is being given to private companies like SpaceX. Different programs like cancer research, etc. are being cut. People in this industry know that the government is not respectful of scientists. And in fact, a very good video that I would recommend to everyone is Angela Collier's video that she just put out on this exact topic, Why Functioning Governments Fund Scientific Research. Amazing video essay if you're interested. But yeah, there's a couple of the claims that were in Elon Musk's Doge Fox interview, specifically on Social Security. They make a lot more claims. It would take way too long to go over all of them, but there are a couple of different things that they are intentionally either lying to you or ignorant. They are either lying to you or ignorant of the facts, right? Or they're intentionally misleading you to give you a false impression to justify their own existence. These are the only options, right? Because according to the facts, they are not presenting them to you in an, what I would say, ethical way. They're not presenting them to you in a way that makes you understand what is actually going on. And you have to ask yourself, why are they doing that? Thank you so much for being here. Remember, you are capable and worthy of love. Good luck out there.